The hand-washing protocol in surgery is supposed to last exactly 2 minutes. I've timed it thousands of times in my decade as an OR nurse, but the sound coming from behind the door of OR 6 has been going on for hours, night after night, when no one is scheduled to be in there. The lights are off, the door is locked, and according to our records, that room hasn't been used in months. So tell me, who's been washing their hands in there? My name is Corinne. I'm 33 years old, and I've been a night shift OR nurse for almost a decade. I started young, thinking I'd make a difference. Now I just hope to get through a shift without something sticking to me. I don't sleep through the night anymore. I wake up at odd hours and feel like I'm still under the hospital's fluorescent glow. I used to talk more, laugh, but I think the quiet has settled into my bones. It lives there now. OR 3 isn't officially out of service, but we rarely use it. It's tucked down at the far end of the surgical wing, past the larger suites with newer equipment. Sometimes it's prepped as backup, but I can't remember the last time a case was actually scheduled there. Still, the supply techs keep it stocked, the cleaners mop it, and someone must test the water flow. At least that's what I told myself the first time I heard the faucet. It was around 3:15 a.m., and the rest of the wing was still. I was walking the rounds, checking prep carts, when I passed OR 3 and heard the slow hiss of running water. I paused. The overhead panel above the door was dark. No case, no team inside. I stepped closer, placed my hand on the door. The sound stopped, just like that. When I opened it, the sink was dry, the floor spotless, nothing out of place. The second time it happened, I ignored it. The third time, I opened the door fast, like I was trying to catch someone in the act. Again, nothing. Just that hum from the ceiling vent and the faint scent of antiseptic. But I started noticing small things. The soap dispenser had tiny bubbles on the nozzle. The mirror had faint spots, like splashes, and once, just once, I saw the faintest outline of a wet footprint near the scrub sink. Just one, toes pointed inward, like someone had been standing there for a very long time. I asked around casually if anyone used OR 3 late at night, maybe for equipment cleaning or overnight prep. No one had. In fact, a few co-workers mentioned they avoided the room entirely. Bad lighting, someone said, always feels off. Another nurse laughed, but her voice wavered. That sink's haunted, she joked. Then she walked away. One night, just past 3, I passed the hallway again and saw something through the narrow window in the door. A figure, back turned, standing at the sink. The overhead light was dim, just enough to silhouette the shape. Shoulders slouched, arms bent like she was scrubbing. I froze. My first thought was that someone had broken protocol and was cleaning without PPE. I pushed the door open quickly, calling out, but the room was empty, bone dry. No figure, no movement, just the mirror above the sink, reflecting nothing but me. I stepped inside, looked around slowly. Nothing. I reached out and touched the faucet. It was cold, not recently used. I stood there for a while watching the mirror. My own eyes looked wrong, wide, flat, like they were waiting for something I hadn't caught up to yet. After that, I started avoiding OR 3, but the sound followed me. Sometimes I'd be prepping trays in OR 5 and swear I heard water. I began washing my hands more than necessary. At first it was just before meals, after glove removal. Then I started doing it at home. In the middle of the night, I'd wake up and feel the weight of something on my fingers. I couldn't sleep until I'd stood at the sink for 5, 10, 15 minutes, scrubbing until the skin went pink and tender. It got worse. The skin on my knuckles split. The backs of my hands were raw. I told myself it was nerves, burnout. But even when I wrapped them in gauze, I felt like I hadn't cleaned them properly. I started using the surgical scrub, even off shift. My bathroom smelled like chlorhexidine. My boyfriend left, said I wasn't in the room anymore. I think I understood what he meant. Sometimes I feel like I'm still in OR 3, like I never left. One night, I stayed late. It wasn't intentional. I just kept moving from task to task, not realizing the time. The wing was dark, only the security lights cast soft shadows down the corridor. I passed OR 3 again, and the sound was louder this time. Water, steady, rhythmic, My feet moved before I could think. I opened the door. She was there, in the corner, back to me, sleeves rolled, hands under the faucet, scrubbing, over and over. I couldn't see her face. Her hair was pulled back tight, neck thin and stiff. I blinked. My hands were shaking. "Ma'am?" I whispered. No answer, just the sound of skin against skin. I stepped forward. The water stopped. The light above flickered. The mirror showed only me. I stumbled backward and shut the door. I haven't opened it since. Now I walk faster past that hallway. I turn up the radio in the break room. I don't talk about it. Not really. But I see the signs in others. Nurses with red hands, raw knuckles, dry soap burns. Maybe we all see her. Maybe no one wants to admit it. Some nights I still wake up with the urge to scrub. I try not to, but my hands twitch under the sheets. I dream of skin peeling off like gloves, layer by layer. Underneath, nothing. Just something hollow, still trying to get clean. I've thought about asking to be reassigned, but where would I go? Every OR has a sink. Every room has silence. Every night shift feels like a confession, waiting to be heard. So I stay. I do my rounds. I nod when people pass. I keep my hands in my pockets now when I can, but they still itch. The water runs sometimes. I hear it, but I don't check anymore. I think she was trying to wash something off. I think she never could. Some things never scrub off. The annex hums like a refrigerator, but lower, deeper, like something alive and sleeping under the floor. They call it the bone room. It's not official, of course. It's just what we call the storage space, where orthopedic trays and graft materials get prepped and kept cold. The tiles are pale and glossy, but the air always feels sticky. There are no windows, just a single steel door that groans a little when you open it, like it's reluctant to let you in or let anything out. My name is Luis. I'm 41. I work nights as a circulating nurse for orthopedic trauma, late fractures, screws, replacements. I used to enjoy it. There's something methodical and satisfying about bone work. It's like fixing furniture. You stabilize, align, close. Simple, clean. But these last few months, I've started to dread that wing of the hospital. Not the cases, not the blood, the bone room. That room changed something in me. It started with the light. I was walking back from post-op around 2 a.m., cutting through the hallway near the bone room like I always do. The overheads were dimmed for night mode, but I noticed a faint glow seeping from the bottom of the steel door. Not white, not yellow, blue, soft and cool, like moonlight through aquarium glass. I paused, bent down to look. The floor beneath the door was dry. No reflections, just that strange blue hue. I figured someone had left a machine on. Maybe the UV sanitizer, maybe an indicator light. I didn't think much of it, but the next night it was there again. Same glow, same angle, same time. I asked around, but no one had been in there. Housekeeping only checks it in the early evening. Sterile supply doesn't restock till morning. That room was supposed to be empty. The third night I saw it, I decided to check. I grabbed my key card, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Everything looked normal. The bone trays were sealed and stacked. The graft materials were organized in labeled drawers. The light was off, no machines running, but I still felt it, that faint hum, like the air was vibrating in my chest. The next day, I mentioned it to Micah, one of the younger nurses. He laughed it off, said he'd never noticed anything, but then he hesitated. Actually, he said, now that you mention it, a couple of my trays have come back wrong. I asked him what he meant. Like, inverted. The bone saw was in the wrong slot, screws placed backward, nothing big, just off. I started checking the trays myself after that, and he was right. Not every time, just enough to make you second guess yourself. Gauze packs tucked in reverse, labels flipped, tools you could have sworn you placed one way but now they're the other. It was subtle but deliberate, like someone was trying to undo the organization one piece at a time. That's when I brought in the UV lamp. We use it during contamination checks, scanning surfaces for bodily fluids, protein residue. I waited until after a case, around 3 a.m., and went into the bone room with the light. I swept it across the counters, the handles, the stainless steel drawers, nothing. Then I turned toward the walls. At first I thought it was graffiti, random smudges and streaks, but then I stepped closer and saw them clearly. Handprints, dozens of them, small, child-sized, fingers too long, palms misshapen. They weren't smeared or erratic. They were climbing up the walls, toward the ceiling, one after another, like something trying to pull itself out of the room, out of the building. I turned off the UV light. The room fell back into that bluish quiet. The normal lights flickered as I left. I didn't report it. Over the next week, things got worse. The glow under the door became brighter. The trays came back with surgical tape twisted into patterns, circles, spirals, shapes that didn't belong. I started hearing noises from inside. Not loud, just soft tapping, like metal on metal. A slow rhythm, like something was building or carving. I had dreams. In one, I was standing in the bone room, and the handprints on the wall started moving, pressing outward from the inside, warping the tile like breath against glass. In another, I turned to leave and saw a second me standing at the door, eyes glowing that same blue. One night, after an emergency tibia repair, I went in to retrieve a missing implant tray. I knew the layout by heart. I knew what drawer it should be in, but it wasn't there. The drawer was empty, except for a note. It wasn't written. It was scraped, etched into the bottom of the drawer with something sharp. It said, "I see the bones." I didn't take the tray. I just left. I told the surgeon we'd misplaced it and ordered a new one from Central Supply. After that, I stopped going in alone. I asked other nurses to join me when pulling inventory, made excuses to stay out of that hallway, but the blue light still came. I saw it from across the corridor. It spilled just a little further every night. One morning, after a double shift, I peeled off my gloves and noticed my fingers looked stained, a faint trace of blue across my nails and cuticles. I scrubbed until the skin turned red, but it didn't fade. The next day, it was gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had marked me, that I'd touched something not meant to be held. Micah quit last week, no warning, just turned in his badge and left. I haven't heard from him. Another nurse found his clipboard near the burn room door. Nothing unusual on it, just a patient checklist, except for the last page. In the margins, he'd written the same word 5 times. Blue, 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 blue. Spelled like that. I've started wearing gloves outside of work. Not latex, just cheap ones from the drugstore. It helps me feel like there's a barrier between me and whatever's still in that room. I don't tell people why. Let them think I'm cold or paranoid. It's easier than explaining, because how do you explain a light that no one else sees? How do you tell someone there are fingerprints beneath the skin of your hospital? And what do you say when someone asks what happened to Micah, and you can still smell the bone room on your clothes? I don't go near that door anymore. But some nights, I swear the blue glow creeps closer. Down the hall, under other doors, toward the ORs. Not all ghosts are patients. Some are things we never documented, never cleaned, never named. They're the ones that stay. In the West Wing, there's a room where echoes go to die, where glass doesn't reflect light, only faces. Or 9, the old teaching theater. It was supposed to be state-of-the-art once, all sterile design and educational ambition. They built the room with full glass walls so that observers could watch surgeries from outside without breaking the sterile field. Now the lights flicker. The air stays cold even when the thermostat says otherwise. The hallway that leads to it feels like a place people pass through too quickly, like a stretch of memory no one wants to stop in. I'm Janelle. I'm 29. I'm a surgical scrub nurse. 2 years ago, I was on track for the trauma team, fast hands, high-pressure procedures, adrenaline junkie. That's what they used to call me. Now I barely raise my voice. I avoid trauma bays. I stick to routine cases, hernia repairs, gallbladders, anything clean and quiet. I tell people I'm burnt out, but that's not the truth. The truth is, I can't walk past the West Wing without feeling like someone's waiting for me on the other side of the glass. It started when I was sent to OR9 to check inventory. No one uses it anymore. Not really. The tech is outdated, and the teaching program shifted to video feeds, but the room is still technically operational, so once a month someone has to go in and verify supply levels. That night, I drew the short straw. The hallway was dim and hushed. The motion sensors didn't trigger the lights fast enough, so I walked part of the way in shadow. When I reached the glass room, I paused. From the outside, the operating table looked like a stage under bad lighting. The glass walls made it feel like the room wasn't real, like a memory stuck behind transparency. I stepped inside. The door sighed shut behind me. The light only came on once I crossed the threshold. Not instantly. It flickered to life in pieces. First the overhead surgical light, then the wall sconces, then the observation booth beyond the glass. The air inside smelled wrong. Not rotten, just old, like sealed plastic and dust, like something had been waiting with its breath held. I walked to the cabinets, opened a drawer. Everything was as expected. Gauze, clamps, suture kits. I ticked boxes off the list, but I kept glancing toward the glass. I thought I saw someone watching me. It was just a shape, faint, blurry, like someone standing behind frosted glass. No details, just the impression of presence. I stepped closer, and it was gone. I told myself it was a reflection, but I checked the angle. There was nothing behind me, nothing to reflect, and yet the sense stayed, like the air itself was aware of me. I finished my list and left without turning around. The next time was a week later. I wasn't supposed to be in that wing, but a case got shuffled, and I had to retrieve a tray from the old sterilizer closet near OR9. As I passed the room, I saw the light flick on. No motion should have triggered it. No one had been assigned to clean or prep, but the room glowed faintly. Inside, I saw shadows, seated figures, vague heads and shoulders in the observation booth. I stepped to the glass and pressed my hand to it. Cold, they didn't move, just sat there. I blinked, the light went out. When it came back on, the room was empty. That night, I dreamed I was on the table inside OR9. My arms were strapped down. I couldn't move my head, but I could hear voices, dozens of them, murmuring just out of range. I could see the glass ceiling above me, and the outline of faces watching from beyond. In the morning, I found the inventory sheet I'd filled out the week before. My handwriting was wrong, not just sloppy, different. Curved letters where mine are sharp, numbers out of order. At the bottom of the sheet, someone had written a name, my name, in all capital letters. The dreams didn't stop. I kept returning to that room, in sleep and in waking thoughts. I started avoiding that end of the hospital, but it found ways to pull me back. A surgeon requesting an old instrument, a supply error routed through the West Wing. I'd find myself outside OR9 again and again. One night, I went in. I don't know why. The door was unlocked, though it shouldn't have been. Inside, the lights were already on. The room was too clean, too ready, like it had been prepped for a case that was never scheduled. I walked to the table. On the Mayo stand sat a patient chart. I opened it. It was mine. My name, my date of birth, my allergies, my photo, taken from my ID badge, but older, somehow drained of life. The procedure listed was unfamiliar. Craniotomy, post-op report, brain death, time of death, 3:03 a.m. The air shifted behind me. I turned slowly, expecting someone, no one. But in the glass I saw two reflections, mine, and one still strapped to the table. I closed the chart and left. Since then, I've been uncertain, unsteady, not just mentally, physically too. I walk past mirrors and they lag behind. My reflection doesn't always sync. Once, in the locker room, I looked up and the mirror showed me still tying my scrub pants, even though I'd already finished. People say I seem distant, that I've been off. I nod and smile. What else can I do? I avoid loud places now. I can't handle crowds. I feel like I'm always being watched, even alone, especially alone. The other night, I passed OR9 and saw the observation booth lit again. This time, the shapes were clearer. Dozens of people, sitting in neat rows, faces pale and expectant. They didn't move, but they were all turned toward the table. I didn't go in. I stood outside, hand on the glass, and watched. The overhead light illuminated the table, empty, but not. Something in the air around it shimmered like a heat mirage. Then one of the seated figures raised its hand and pointed at me. I haven't walked past that hallway since. I dream of the table more now, of waking up in that room, hearing machines I can't see. Sometimes I hear my own voice narrating a case, explaining procedure, but I never remember what I said when I wake up. Sometimes I wonder if I died in that room 2 years ago, not physically, just some part of me, the part that used to laugh, that used to fight, that used to run toward emergencies instead of away from them. I see that version of myself sometimes. She's on the other side of the glass, watching me, waiting. Maybe for me to catch up, maybe for me to let go. I don't know which one of us is the ghost. I think the people behind the glass are waiting for me to remember. Below the operating rooms, the floor sweats. You'd think it was just condensation from the pipes or the old ventilation system, but it feels different. The tile down there never dries completely. No matter how long the fans run, it always smells faintly metallic, like the memory of blood. I walk the subfloor halls more than most people in the building, and I've learned that water doesn't lie. It always carries something. Sometimes it's just steam and dirt. Sometimes it's something heavier, something that remembers. My name is Rafiq. I'm 38 years old. I work in sterile processing, which means I clean what the body can't keep. I take trays full of blood and bone and cartilage, and I make them new again, ready for the next patient, the next cut. I used to think of myself as invisible. No one notices the guy who runs the sterilizers, but lately I think that's the reason it found me. You have to be very quiet to hear what lives underneath. It started 6 months ago, during a routine filter flush. I'd gone down to the subfloor to check the drainage line under OR6. The drain kept clogging after orthopedic cases, backing up just enough to cause concern. We assumed it was buildup from bone dust or adhesive, maybe gauze that slipped through, but the clog kept returning. I was alone that night, around 2:30 a.m., the hospital sleeping above my head. I crouched beside the access grate with my flashlight, tools laid out beside me, and I heard it, a slow drip. It wasn't unusual. Liquids passed through the sterilization lines all the time, but this drip had rhythm, like a clock, like it wasn't coming from above, but from within the drain. I unscrewed the grate and leaned in. The smell hit first, wet metal and old skin. Then I saw the liquid. It was red, thick, and it was running against gravity, up the curve of the pipe. It pooled in a small circle beneath the drain lip, before sliding back down, like something exhaling from below. I pulled back and wiped my face with the sleeve of my gown. When I looked again, the pipe was dry, completely dry, like it had never dripped at all. I told myself it was a trick of light. Rust and water, maybe residue from the heat. I put the grate back on and finished the check. But when I logged the report, my hand shook. I didn't write anything about the blood. I didn't think I needed to. A week later, I was down there again. Different room, different line. This time I found a smear on the wall just past the second corridor. Not large, just a faint red streak about waist high, dried into the grout. I bent closer. It wasn't paint. It wasn't rust. It had soaked in, like something tried to hold onto the surface. I followed it for a few feet. The smear faded, but the wall felt damp, too warm. I started hearing things after that. Small sounds, footsteps behind me when I knew I was alone, breathing soft and low, like someone standing just out of sight. I'd look over my shoulder and see nothing, just the long corridor lined with shadow and pipe. I told myself it was the air system cycling through, the thud of machinery echoing, but my skin prickled every time I descended the maintenance stairwell. One night, the sterilizer malfunctioned. A full tray came through with biofilm still visible. That shouldn't have been possible. The cycle had run in full. When I opened the chamber, the instruments were laid out wrong, crossed, tangled, and covered in a film that looked almost like skin oil. But it wasn't sticky. It was cold, slick like old fluid. I ran the load again. This time, everything came out clean. I blamed myself. Maybe I'd loaded it wrong. Maybe the heat seals had weakened. But deep down, I knew I'd cleaned 1,000 trays in the last 10 years. That load wasn't mine. The dream started after that. In them, I'm walking the subfloor in silence, but the drains are open, all of them, dozens of round mouths breathing in the dark, and from each one, red threads stretch toward me, slow and pulsing, like veins uncoiling. They reach for my ankles, wrap around my wrists, pull me toward the floor. I never scream in the dream. I just let it happen, like part of me knows that's where I belong. After one of those nights, I woke up and found my ID badge on the floor of the locker room, not on the bench, not clipped to my scrubs. The plastic was cracked down the middle. When I picked it up, I noticed something carved faintly into the back, something I hadn't seen before. It was the date of my accident. 5 years ago, I was found unconscious near the autoclave, massive blood loss from a ruptured artery in my thigh. I slipped on fluid, they said, hit my head, was out for minutes before someone found me. I barely remember it, just flashes, a bright white light, the sound of rushing water, a voice whispering my name. I never figured out who found me. I went back down to the drain below OR6. The grate had been removed. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was the puddle. It wasn't water. It was thicker, the color of dried blood diluted with time. But what froze me wasn't the puddle. It was what sat in the middle of it. My badge, my old one, from before the accident, cracked in the same place. I stared at it for a long time. My hand shook as I picked it up. It felt cold, wet, even though the surface was dry. I looked around, but the corridor was empty, dead silent. No air vents hissing, no distant hums, just silence, and that low crawling feeling under my skin. I left the badge where it was. Since then, I've stopped going down there unless absolutely necessary. I finish paperwork in the break room now. I eat quickly. I check over my shoulder when I hear drips, even in daylight. My co-workers joke that I'm jumpy. You sterilize ghosts now too? Someone said last week. I didn't laugh. The other night, I passed a nurse in the hallway. She didn't say anything, just nodded. Her eyes were dark and rimmed with red. Her scrubs were soaked at the hem. I looked down and saw a trail of wet footprints behind her, leading toward the maintenance stairs. I turned the other way. Sometimes, I wonder if I actually ever got up from that floor 5 years ago. If maybe I bled out and something else stood up in my place. Something quieter, something that still hears the drains breathing at night. Now, I avoid mirrors. I check my reflection like it might show something I missed. I scrub longer after each shift, not for bacteria, for memory. The hospital forgets a lot. The ORs are places of precision, control, order. But underneath the drains remember. They carry what we try to wash away. They hold it, preserve it, feed on it. Some stains don't lift, they settle. There's one operating room without a clock. It's OR2, always has been. The others all have wall clocks, standard issue, mounted above the scrub sink, or next to the supply cabinets, ticking softly under fluorescent light. You'd think they were just for reference, but they're more than that. They're anchors, markers in the drift of time. Without them, everything blurs, and in OR2, time doesn't just blur, it disappears. My name is Evelyn. I'm 45. I've been an OR charge nurse for 17 years. I manage the flow, keep cases moving, make sure every tray is where it needs to be. You'd think I'd be used to odd things. Surgeons losing track of instruments, lights flickering, patients talking nonsense before anesthesia. But this isn't like that. This isn't something I can write up or report to facilities, because when I step into OR2, I stop knowing how long I've been there. It was a simple lapcology that first made me notice. The surgeon, Dr. Gupta, is precise. Her cases run 38 to 42 minutes, almost without exception. That night, I was assisting. Scrub nurse called out, and I stepped in to fill. The case felt normal. No complications, no bleeding. We closed without issue. But when I looked up at the clock, there wasn't one. I thought maybe it had been removed for repair. When we stepped out, I checked the time on the OR board. The procedure had taken an hour and 17 minutes, nearly double what it should have. I asked the anesthetist, Joel, if there'd been delays. He blinked, said no. He'd thought it had been 40 minutes, maybe 45. It wasn't a big deal at first. Delays happen, but it kept happening. Whenever a case was moved into OR2, the surgeons reported odd sensations, losing track of steps, having to repeat themselves, instruments not being where they remembered placing them. Nurses came out glassy-eyed, confused about what stage they were in. One tech came out halfway through a procedure, only to find the hallway clock reading earlier than when he went in. He swore it was broken. It wasn't. I brought it up in a morning huddle once, asked why OR2 never had a clock installed. Everyone went quiet. Then someone laughed and said, "That room doesn't want one." I let it go, until the night I stayed in there alone. We'd had a double booking and moved one case into OR2 late. Appendectomy, straightforward, but the patient started crashing post-intubation and they cancelled the case. I stayed behind to help re-sterilize the room. Everyone else moved on to OR5. I figured I'd wipe down the surfaces, reset the supply cart, and catch up with the next prep. But something felt off the moment the door shut. The air was thick, like the HVAC had stalled. The surgical lights buzzed faintly, casting sharp shadows against the floor. I started wiping down the Mayo stand, then the back table, then moved to the wall shelves, and then I stopped. I didn't know why. My hands were still, the wipe dangling from my fingers. I stared at the wall, but couldn't remember what I was doing. I looked at the tray beside me. It was wet, half cleaned, but the cloth in my hand was dry. I checked the wall panel. No time. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Dead, even though I charged it right before shift. The intercom buzzed softly, then stopped. When I opened the door to leave, the hallway was darker than it should have been, dimmer, like the light had faded just a little without turning off. I walked to the OR board. The listed time was nearly 4 a.m. I'd entered the room just after midnight. I don't know what I did for 4 hours. I didn't tell anyone, but I started noticing other things. A nurse came out of OR2 holding a sponge tray, staring down at it, like she didn't recognize the instruments. A resident walked in for his first assist and came out 2 hours later, drenched in sweat, shaking, saying he didn't remember closing, that the patient just wasn't open anymore. Then there was June. She's one of ours, scrub nurse, quiet, focused. She was in OR2 assisting on a scope, routine case, but she never came out. We found her sitting in the corner, still in full sterile gear, mask on, gloves on, staring at the wall. The case had ended almost an hour before. No one noticed she hadn't left with the team. When we got to her, she just kept saying, "I lost the time. I dropped it somewhere." They took her to psych eval. She never came back. Now, we try not to schedule cases in there, unless we have no choice. But the room's still part of the grid. It's still there, still waiting. I tried to have a clock installed. I put in the request myself. Facilities confirmed it. Work order posted. 3 days later, the tech came to see me. He said the bracket won't stay. He's installed it 3 times. Every time, the screws come loose overnight. Once, the clock itself shattered on the floor, even though no one had entered the room. He said, maybe it doesn't want to be watched. That stuck with me. The last time I entered OR2, it was just to retrieve a cart. The room was dark. The motion sensor didn't trigger right away. For a second, it was pitch black. And in the darkness, I heard breathing. Not mechanical, not from the vents. Shallow, human, close. When the light flickered on, I was alone. The cart was in the corner. I rolled it out without looking back. Now I avoid that door. If I have to assign a case to it, I feel a knot in my stomach, like I'm sending someone into a place that doesn't mark their time properly. Like the person who goes in won't be exactly the same one who comes out, because that's what the clock does, isn't it? It tells you who you are, moment by moment. It's the proof that you're still moving forward. Without it, you drift. And in OR2, there's only the drift. I keep my own watch now, analog, worn tight against my wrist. I check it compulsively, even when I'm in other rooms, just to make sure I haven't lost anything. But sometimes I still feel that slip, that weightlessness, like I've forgotten something important, like I left a part of myself in that room. And maybe I did, because time is a thread, and or two is a place where the thread frays, where it floats in still air and forgets how to move forward, where we all end up eventually, just for a little while, just long enough to forget we were ever counting. When the light flickered on, I was alone. The cart was in the corner. I rolled it out without looking back. Now I avoid that door. If I have to assign a case to it, I feel a knot in my stomach, like I'm sending someone into a place that doesn't mark their time properly. Like the person who goes in won't be exactly the same one who comes out, because that's what the clock does, isn't it? It tells you who you are, moment by moment. It's the proof that you're still moving forward. Without it, you drift, and in OR2, there's only the drift. I keep my own watch now, analog, worn tight against my wrist. I check it compulsively, even when I'm in other rooms, just to make sure I haven't lost anything. But sometimes I still feel that slip, that weightlessness, like I've forgotten something important, like I left a part of myself in that room, and maybe I did, because time is a thread, and OR2 is a place where the thread frays, where it floats in still air and forgets how to move forward, where we all end up eventually, just for a little while, just long enough to forget we were ever counting.